Today at 12, mass detentions in China as protests over strict COVID lockdowns spread to major cities. The demonstrations are an unprecedented challenge to President Xi Jinping. Some are openly calling for him to resign.
If the government has a plan, it's not told people what it is. And so the belief that this could go on forever is causing a lot of consternation amongst the general public.
Well, why is China's COVID policy in such a mess? We'll have the very latest, also on the programme. 3 people are arrested after the bodies of 2 babies are discovered at a house in South Wales. The government is to spend an extra £1 billion to insulate homes in England, Scotland and Wales. Professional footballers in Scotland will be banned from heading the ball in training the day before and after a game over fears of long-term brain injury. And a sneak peek at the Roman villa hidden for 1,500 years and discovered under a field in the East Midlands.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel.
Good afternoon. China's strict zero-COVID policy is being challenged on an unprecedented scale, with a second night of protests in cities right across the country. Many demonstrators held up blank banners in protest at censorship, and some called for President Xi Jinping to step down. The unrest was triggered by the deaths of 10 people in a fire at a block of flats last week. Some are blaming COVID restrictions for delaying the rescue effort. Well, the blaze was in the city of Urumqi in northwest China, and mass protests there have now spread to cities including Chengdu and Wuhan, Nanjing, Shanghai and the capital, Beijing, from where our China correspondent Stephen McDonald has the very latest and a warning his report does contain some flash photography.
The Chinese capital became the latest city with a demonstration calling for an end to the country's COVID restrictions. The symbol of this movement has become white sheets of paper, with protesters holding them up to represent the way in which people are silenced here by official censorship. They're chanting, saying that strict lockdowns and compulsory testing should stop. But dissatisfaction with the government's handling of this crisis is also spilling over into calls for press freedom and democracy. In the southwestern city of Chengdu, protesters blamed China's leader Xi Jinping personally. They criticised his lifetime leadership entitlement and said their country doesn't need an emperor. This followed earlier calls in Shanghai for Xi Jinping to step down and for the Communist Party to give up power. At the site where protesters clashed with police, barriers have gone up to stop crowds gathering again. Waves of anger have spread across China following an apartment block fire in Xinjiang last week, which killed 10 residents. People have blamed COVID restrictions for hampering the access of firefighters and blocking escape routes. China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian said foreign forces with ulterior motives had linked the fire to zero COVID measures. But these protests have unleashed discontent, which has been not very far below the surface. A chant can easily become a speech. Freedom! This man said people wanted dignity and the rule of law, and added that he didn't want China's children to go on living in this era of horror.
One of the problems in China is that nobody knows when zero COVID will end. If the government has a plan, it's not told people what it is. And so the belief that this could go on forever is causing a lot of consternation amongst the general public.
Zero COVID in China means trying to return each outbreak to zero infections, using strict stay-at-home orders, travel bans and mass testing. Entire cities are sometimes officially locked down or effectively closed with businesses shut. Yet even with these strict measures, COVID-19 continues to spread. The country posted record new case numbers over the past 5 days in a row. Stephen McDonald, BBC News, Beijing.
Well, the BBC says it's extremely concerned about the treatment of one of its journalists who was arrested while covering the protests in Shanghai. Camera journalist Ed Lawrence was beaten and kicked by police before being held for several hours. Chinese officials say he was detained as a precaution against being infected with COVID by demonstrators. BBC's former China correspondent Robin Brandt is with me. He's just returned from the country. He was there a few months ago. Robin, I'm struck by the fact that you've got 1.5 million people gathering in Qatar for the World Cup. COVID is not on the radar. You've got a command economy like China's, where clearly a vaccination program hasn't worked. Why has it gone so wrong?
Well, China and Xi Jinping at the top think it's actually gone very well. The narrative from Beijing is distinctly different to the narrative that we understand here or in the States or in Spain. And also, China's people have seen something very different. What they have seen is victory. China beat the virus, or so the leadership and the Communist Party said at the very beginning in the summer of 2020. There was an official rendition of that in the government white paper. It's contained the virus, and it continues to do that, it hopes, by this kind of citywide, regional-wide whack-a-mole. The problem is you can't beat science. And when you combine the development of coronavirus with fatigue, and remember, we are approaching the 3rd anniversary of the outbreak of COVID-19, you get pressures like this. Now, I endured, a 67-day lockdown in Shanghai just before we left the country. The man who oversaw that, which was hugely damaging to Shanghai, a city of 24 million people and its economy, the man who oversaw that was recently promoted in the Communist Party structure. So on one level, the leadership sees it as success, and that means its credibility and the party's legitimacy is now very closely associated with that.
OK, so what does President Xi do now?
Well, look, as I said, I think the key thing here is look to what Xi Jinping said at that Congress meeting just last month, a big 5-yearly gathering of government officials. He said this is a people's war to stop the spread of the virus. And look at the People's Daily this morning, the mouthpiece, and I really mean this, the mouthpiece of the ruling Communist Party. On the front page, it talks about improving the effectiveness of COVID responses. Now, I take that to mean improve the effectiveness of the police and the authorities in places like Shanghai in dealing with protesters like this. Success in dealing with COVID, and I have to reiterate, they see it broadly as success in containing it across a country of 1.4 billion people. That is now crucial for Xi Jinping in terms of his personal leadership legitimacy and the credibility of the party as a whole.
Yeah, all right. Robin, good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. Robin Brandt there. And for all the latest analysis on this developing story, just visit our website, bbc.co.uk/news. Now, 3 people have been arrested after the bodies of 2 babies were found at a house in South Wales. Mark Hutchings is at the scene for us in Bridgend. Mark, what more do we know?
Well, as you can no doubt see behind me, there remains a police presence here, both outside and inside the house on the estate here in the Wildmill area, where the very sad discovery was made at around about 8 o'clock on Saturday night. We've seen forensic officers arrive here a short time ago, and South Wales police stress that officers will remain visible in this area while detectives try to piece together exactly what has happened here. We've spoken to some local people who have expressed their sadness at seeing what has unfolded here and continues to unfold, and they have said how people in this house weren't terribly well known in the area. We've had a comment from Superintendent Mark Atwell of South Wales Police, who says that it's a very distressing incident, and also from the council leader, Hugh David, who says it's shocking and tragic. Now, the authorities are appealing for information, but also appealing for people not to speculate on social media about what might have happened. Clearly, many details yet to emerge, but what we do know are those grim, basic facts that police are now investigating the discovery of the bodies of 2 babies.
Yeah. OK. Mark, thank you for that. Mark Hutchings there, live in Bridgend. A 16-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder after 2 teenagers were fatally stabbed just a mile apart in southeast London. Now, the boys, who are also 16, died on Saturday evening following the 2 separate incidents in Greenwich. The police say the attacks are linked. An extra £1 billion will be used to insulate thousands of homes across England, Scotland and Wales. The government says a 3-year programme beginning next spring will provide loft and cavity wall insulation, saving hundreds of pounds on household bills. Our political correspondent Damien Grammaticus has that story.
When it comes to our homes, the UK is said to have the oldest and least energy-efficient housing in Europe. Much of it leaky old Victorian terraces built over 100 years ago, a legacy of the Industrial Revolution. There is already a government scheme to get energy firms to help improve the worst homes. Called ECO, it's been in place for almost a decade and is open to those in social housing or who own their own homes or rent privately and are on some benefits. It's now being expanded with another £1 billion, but only starting in spring next year and eligibility extended to those in lower council tax bands.
It's going to be open to everybody, regardless of whether you live in private rented or you own your own home. And it's designed for you to be able to take measures to improve your home if your energy certificate is a D or worse. And those measures could save you over £300 a year.
Fuel poverty campaigners say more should be done now for the most vulnerable.
We believe government focus should be on the worst first, helping people in the greatest risk and greatest jeopardy. More of this money should be going to help them.
If you are eligible, your energy firm will do a survey and pay for the improvements, usually low-cost insulation or upgrades to your heating. The average cost, about £1,500 per home. It could cut your energy bill by a few £100 a year. Labour have described it as a reheated announcement with no new resources, and campaigners say to really change things will cost billions more.
If we are still exposed to the kind of pressures we've seen leading into this energy crisis, and we were too exposed in terms of decisions government had made going into them, we'll not get to the position we need to be, because we cannot be repeating the kind of pressures people have been under this winter and going into next year. We've got to see a bit more ambition, a lot more ambition actually from the government, to make sure we're not in this position again.
This winter, the government is now planning to spend £18 million on more public information about how to reduce energy usage, including advice to turn down the temperature of your boiler, turn off radiators when you're not using a room, and seal drafts from windows and doors. But many worry that the biggest concern should be for those who won't be able to heat their homes at all. Damien Grammaticus, BBC News, Westminster.
The lobby group pushing for greater investment in the north of England, the Northern Powerhouse Partnership, is warning that rail services in the north are at risk of collapsing into chaos. The operators TransPennine Express and Avanti West Coast have faced criticism for cancellations and reduced timetables in recent months. The government says it's working with train companies to make sure passengers can have confidence in the service. Professional footballers in Scotland will be banned from heading the ball in training the day before and the day after a game over fears of long-term brain injuries. Clubs are also being told to limit training to 1 session per week if it involves repetitive heading. Let's talk to our Sports News correspondent Chris McLaughlin, who's live in Motherwell. Chris, how is this news going down of the changes?
Well, the Scottish FA, Clive, say this is all about safeguarding the long-term health of professional football players. They point to a field study in 2019 that suggested that ex-professional football players are 3.5 times more likely to develop brain problems like dementia. So they know this is happening, the experts. They don't quite know why it's happening. They suspect it's got something to do with repeated head trauma. In football, of course, that would mean heading the ball. So they say it's best to act now. Now, this does, as you say, have a huge impact on how clubs will train, clubs like Motherwell behind me, because the day before a game is traditionally when clubs would work on things like set pieces, and that often means crossing and heading the ball. The clubs that I've spoken to, the players that I've spoken to, are broadly supportive of this. I think they know that change has been coming for some time. The FA have implemented their own limitations in training headers already this season. I think players, managers, the game in general know that this is the direction of travel. It does mean the obvious question, is heading the ball safe? Scientists don't really know for sure. They see they say that for now, more research is needed.
OK, Chris, thank you for that. Chris McLaughlin there, live in Motherwell. Police across Europe have dismantled what they describe as a drugs super cartel responsible for around a third of the continent's cocaine trade. The European Union's police agency says it's made more than 40 arrests in Spain, France, Belgium and the Netherlands. A huge landslide on the Italian island of Ischia is now known to have killed at least 14 people. That's according to the regional governor. Several others are missing after homes were buried under tons of mud over the weekend. More than 100 firefighters, as well as divers and earth-moving units, are now on the island trying to clear the streets. Here's our Rome correspondent, Mark Lowen.
Out of tragedy comes solidarity too. From islanders doing their bit to clean, restore, help their Ischia emerge from the mud. It was in part a disaster waiting to happen, with half the homes here illegally built, unable to withstand it. But for now, the needs are too great to look back.
We must show our spirit. It's a catastrophe that's hit the island and our hearts. We need to show that beyond that disaster, we know there have been errors in the past, of course, but we want to be part of the future.
It was before dawn on Saturday that after torrential rain, the earth began to slide, pouring mud and debris down the hill, engulfing what lay in its path. Today the cleanup went on, slowly lifting what was hurled down here in seconds, the force of the mudslide devastating to see. Far above the seafront is where the onslaught began. On Santa Barbara Street, lives are in ruins, houses caked in mountains of mud. Everybody here was either hit or knows those who were. New victims are taken away as the number of dead continues to grow.
Beneath the mud are homes, cars, but also bodies. We just met an elderly gentleman who had discovered that his grandchild had been buried by the landslide here. He was too emotional to talk. Well beyond the cleanup, this is a community that will take so long to recover.
Rocco Castaldi does what he can to help clear his uncle's home, deluged by the rivers of mud.
We are scared because we are living under this mountain that can go down in any moment, you know. We are scared and we are very sorry for the people who lost their lives.
Do you know people on the streets?
Most of them. Most of them. We're a small city and we know everybody, you know. It's like a small family all around this place.
There's little more they can do now than to wait as the search and rescue operation goes on, scouring the island for those still missing. Climate change and extreme weather have collided with Ischia's corrupt construction. For this stricken island, it's been a calamitous mix. Mark Lowen, BBC News, Ischia.
It is 18 minutes past 12, our top story this lunchtime. And there have been mass detentions in China as protests over strict COVID lockdowns spread to major cities. The demonstrations are an unprecedented challenge to President Xi Jinping. And coming up, we're in Bristol to see how BBC viewers have offered to help out struggling single dad Samuel.
Coming up on the BBC News Channel, time champions.
And in Qatar at the World Cup, defeats in their opening group matches left Cameroon and Serbia on the brink. So their meeting today was crucial for both sides. Here's our sports correspondent, Andy Swiss.
How's this for an entrance? Cameroon's players arriving at the stadium in full voice and high spirits before it was down to Mort. But what an unforgettable match. Andy Swiss, BBC News.
Well, we're expecting to hear from the England and Welsh camps today ahead of their crucial match tomorrow. Both sides have been in training, so let's hear from our correspondents. First to our sports correspondent, Alex Howell, on the England preparations. England, of course, they need Alex. Nothing worse than a heavy defeat in order to progress.
That's right, Clive, and the England team are training as we speak, just
behind me here at the training camp in Al Wakra. 25 of the 26 players are out there today. It's only Arsenal defender Ben White who isn't. We understand that he has an illness. Leicester City's James Maddison is in full training after he missed the first few sessions since England arrived and the tournament got underway. Yesterday we spoke to Manchester United forward Marcus Rashford, and he was telling us they don't actually need the fans to boo to let them know that they haven't played well. The players know that themselves, and he said it was unrealistic to expect the players to be at their best and the team to be at their best every game. And Gareth Southgate has been speaking to the team, and he told them that only once in the team's history have England won all 3 group games at a World Cup. There have been calls for Gareth Southgate to make changes ahead of the big game against Wales. Manchester City's Phil Foden, one of the players who have been called for to come into the team. One player we can expect to start the game tomorrow is Liverpool captain Jordan Henderson, and he's going to be alongside the manager this evening. England know they're in control of the group, and a positive result for them will see them into the last 16 and the knockout stages of the World Cup.
Alex, thank you. Alex Howell there with the England team. Let's talk to our Wales correspondent, Howell Griffith, who's in Doha. We all know, of course, Howell, the Welsh, they've got an uphill battle, haven't they?
Absolutely, yes. We'll hear the thoughts of manager Robert Page and captain Gareth Bale in a couple of hours from now. But we already know that the Wales camp felt, well, pretty bruised in every sense of the word after that defeat to Iran the other night. They were outfought on the pitch and mentally left drained under the desert sun. They know now that only a win against England and other results going their way can offer them a route through this tournament. Having waited 64 years for it, I think people felt very flat. But, you know, they say that they can pick themselves up for this, and essentially they have nothing to lose. Speaking to fans around Doha this morning, yes, they share that sense of deflation, frustration maybe, that the players, this golden generation of Welsh footballers led by Gareth Bale, hadn't shown their best in this tournament so far. But maybe the Welsh way would be to, you know, pluck it out in the last dying moment. An impossible task? Well, no, of course. Wales have beaten England before, back in 1984. And in the Euros, although they lost in 2016, Wales found a way through in that tournament. So hope hasn't been lost, but to be realistic, many Welsh fans expect this to be a very, very tough match tomorrow, and some knowing they may well be home by the end of the week.
All right, Howell, thank you for the Howell Griffith there live in Doha. Earlier this month, we brought you the story of Samuel, a single dad from Bristol who lives in a one-bedroom flat with his 2 young sons and has been struggling with the cost of living. Well, after appearing on BBC News, many of you got in touch, offering help and to ask how he's getting on. Fiona Lambdin's been finding out.
This is what we got to live in. 3 of us sleeping in one bed. And I really can't take any more of this.
Since Samuel spoke so openly, the response has been huge. All sorts of offers. Restaurants in Bristol offering to feed him and the boys for free. People turning up with donated bunk beds. Just look at all these emails, which we're about to show Samuel now.
What's it like getting all these? What does it make you feel?
It makes me feel like I'm being listened to. Oh. Life. Oh. School run time. Give Julia a big hug. Yeah. Say thank you.
Thank you. All right then, take care all of you.
Okay. I've got something for you. You can go first.
Charlie and her partner also live on the 15th floor with their 4 girls.
So there's 6 of us in a 2-bedroom flat. So yeah, everyone's on top of each other, no space. Stuck in a place like this, you can't really do anything. It does take a toll being here. It's nice to know that there is people like Sam and other people in the building that do help out as well.
Samuel's boys have spent hours and hours playing football inside their flat. Since we filmed with them, a community football club has invited them along to train.
Hello.
Hello, how's it going?
What's your name?
I'm Chris, nice to meet you.
My name's Lysander.
Nice to meet you.
This project's tackling antisocial behaviour by keeping children off the street and it's only a mile from their tower block.
It is amazing. This is awesome. There are many clubs all around doing things, but as the way things are, you can't afford them. They're too far, and it's just not viable for us to do it. So we tend to stay away from it. Just to see the joy on their face. Look at that. Just happy.
I felt nervous. Me too. Because I was here for the first time. I was doing quite good. And my dad said that I've improved more.
Puts a smile on your face, yeah? You feel happy? That's good. You enjoy that? All right, you gonna go and play some more? Nah. All right, yeah. Lovely. Lovely. That's what it's about. Look at that.
Fiona Lambdin, BBC News.
The former England footballer Jill Scott was the winner in last night's final of ITV's I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. The actor Owen Warner came second and the MP and former Health Secretary Matt Hancock finished third. Now, he'd faced criticism for entering the jungle, losing the Tory party whip for taking part in the series as a sitting MP. The Business Secretary Grant Shapps says Mr Hancock's appearance on the show suggests his career at Westminster is pretty much done. A full skeleton cast of what could be the largest animal ever to walk on land is coming to the UK in the new year. The dinosaur, known as Patago Titan, will go on display at the Natural History Museum in London, measuring 115 feet from nose to tail. It could have weighed up to 60 or 70 tons, more than 5 double-decker buses.
It's just absolutely enormous. So I look at this tiny femur in front of me thinking that really hurt me carrying it to the studio. And I just think people they'll be inspired when they see this at the Natural History Museum. And for me, that's the most important thing dinosaurs can do, get kids really into natural history.
Now, it's been described as an archaeological treasure trove. Roman mosaics and buildings discovered under a farmer's field in Rutland in the East Midlands. Now, the remarkable find was made during the coronavirus lockdown in 2020, but archaeologists have uncovered more and more artifacts ever since. The exact location is being kept secret, but Phil Mackey has been given exclusive access.
After a millennium and a half, a Roman home has emerged from the soil. This is part of the Rutland Villa complex, first discovered by the landowner's son 2 years ago. Last year they started digging and found this amazing mosaic depicting a scene from Homer's Iliad. Nothing like it had ever been found in Britain before. They also used ground-penetrating radar to survey the entire field and saw many more buildings.
It's divided into 3 rooms, and each room would have had its own temperature. So this room is what's known as the caldarium.
This summer, archaeologists returned and uncovered much, much more.
Just gobsmacked, really. I mean, this is not the sort of survival of archaeology that we expect in a rural situation. This is complete one-off, really. I think, just by finding the mosaic as we did a couple of years ago, it's amazing.
So this is one of the buildings that is part of a much larger villa complex. This is the living room here. That is the fireplace, and you can still see the charred remains of a fire that must have been lit 1700 years ago. And what this site does is it gives a much greater insight into life at a period about which we know very little, and will give a greater understanding of what life was like in Roman Britain. The field is literally filled with Roman rubble, roof tiles, pottery and masonry. And they found another mosaic with an intricate pattern, a way for the family who owned it to show off their wealth.
It's amazing. I mean, it sort of makes up for all the muddy ditches that I've spent a lot of my time in. Just being able to work on something like this, it kind of brings you a lot closer to the people that were living here, really, and you're sort of experiencing the same kind of things that they would have been looking at every day. So it really does bring it to life for you.
They think the site's possibly 100 years older than previously thought, although the mosaics were added much later in the 5th century, a last blast of Roman Britain. Phil Mackey, BBC News, Rutland.
Now, for a look at the weather, Stav's here. Hi there, Stav.
Hi there, Clive. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you. We've been fed up of all the rain that we've had over the last couple of months. There are some changes on the way. Of course, the rain that we did have was very much needed, but some big changes in the way of the feel to the weather. It's going to turn colder and it's going to be dry. And that's because of this huge area of high pressure, which is really exerting its force across the northeast of Europe and towards Scandinavia. And that's going to start to bring us east and then southeasterly winds and push these weather fronts out at bay. But we do have a weakish weather front across more western and southern areas through this afternoon, bringing some showers from western Scotland through the Irish Sea, Wales, southwest England down in towards the Channel. A bit more of a breeze there, but a much better afternoon for the south and southeast after yesterday's cloud and rain. Top temperatures 11 or 12 degrees, a little bit cooler than that further north. Now, as we head through this evening, we'll start to see those showers fading away for many areas. It will turn dry, lengthy clear skies with light winds and slightly colder air mass. It's going to be a cold night to come, certainly colder than what we've been used to of late. Frost out of town across many central, northern and western areas, a bit more cloud and fog affecting the Midlands and in towards the southeast. So it does look like Tuesday morning could see some problematic fog around, could be quite dense in places. There'll also be some frost as well, so pretty chilly and foggy for many of us through the morning. Some areas starting off dry and sunny. It looks like the fog will tend to lift into low cloud, I think, but it may linger in some areas, and where it does linger it's going to stay quite grey and chilly. Temperatures in single figures tomorrow, maybe up to 10 degrees for Norwich, but these are closer to the seasonal norm. It'll feel a lot colder than what we've been used to. Then as we head into the middle part of the week, that area of high pressure begins to exert its force a little bit more, keeps this weather front out at bay which tries to make inroads, but it looks like it'll bring a breezier, cloudier, wetter day for Northern Ireland, perhaps the north and west of Scotland. But elsewhere, under that influence of high pressure with southeasterly winds, it's going to stay largely dry, but rather grey and gloomy, I think, for many, with limited spells of brightness. Again, some mist and fog around here and there. Sort of murky grey day, I think. Top temperatures maybe up to 10 degrees across the southeast, but I think for most single figures. Double figures, though, where we have that weather front with the rain. You can see why, because it's slightly milder air here. But that area of high pressure continues to influence towards the end of the week. We start to draw in a colder easterly wind. Not very cold, but certainly colder than what we've been used to. And temperatures will be below the seasonal norm, I think, towards the end of the week. So single figures for most, rather grey and gloomy. We could start to see a few showers pushing off the North Sea into eastern parts of the country. These could have a wintry flavour to them over the high ground. So some big changes to the weather on the way. That's it. Back to you, Clive.
Big change. OK, Stav, thank you. Stav de Nester. That's it. So, goodbye from me. Now let's join our news teams where you are. Have a very good afternoon.